I didn't have core values clear in my company until after restaurant 2. I went into restaurant 2 with no core values defined. I didn't even have a black and white mission statement in the company until after restaurant 2. And what I realized was, man, I am working like a dog every day. 10, 11, 12 o'clock, leave the restaurant, go to my office to do paperwork to make sure I'm ahead the next day. And I found myself in this concentric cycle of just repeat. And I knew I wasn't getting adaptation to the things you just mentioned. So I spent time huddling on what it is that drove me and what I wanted out of everyone who worked for me. And that's where my core values came from. And they've pivoted over the years because as I've brought in also other great leaders, they've helped influence the clarity of those messages. Whereas the mission has been clear since the day I published it in this company, probably in 2015. The core values for the most part are black and white. And so to answer your question, I look for people who have those values, and I obsess to figure out whether you really have them or you don't. And I'll give a shout out to Gino Wickman, who wrote Fraction, who's a dear friend. And I have obsessed about the clarity of Gino's work. And I'm a plus guy. I look at, do you have the core values? And is it a plus minus, or a minus? So all the time, sometimes, or never. I have a qualifying factor in this company. You can't be a never. If you're a never, you're a cultural misfit.
Yes.
If you're sometimes, I'm going to work with you to figure out how close I can get to all the time. But I measure everything everyone does on core values. Every second counts. Can I tell in your actions that that's a point? Consistently care about the smallest details. I measure whether that's part of it. Do you own it with pride in this organization? When it's not good, most importantly, do you own it with pride? Are you willing to learn and teach? Like I constantly look for human beings that possess those core values, and I measure you based on that. And then at the end of the day, like your capacities drive what chair you could sit in on the bus to, drive the bus. But, take those core values. If they're there, and I use this reference all the time, chickens and eagles don't fly together. So I'm looking for eagles, and the eagles help push away the chickens. So when you got a lot of eagles, they make it hard for the chickens to stay.
Well, today we're filming an incredible conversation with my man in downtown Detroit at what is without question one of the finest dining experiences in the Midwest, prime and proper in downtown Detroit. I've got the privilege and pleasure of being with my guy, Jeremy Sasson. And Jeremy is the founder and CEO of Heirloom Hospitality, graduate of the University of Miami, entrepreneur, founder, community builder, based in Detroit. But most importantly, my man is working on the mastery of being a husband and a father. And we're going to talk about that at the end today. Husband to Allie, 1L-Y, and proud father to CC, Jagger, Ace, and L. Jeremy, thanks for being with us, brother.
Thanks for having me, Manny. Great intro.
We're gonna start with the name, because so I'm getting prepped for today, and in the 8 years roughly that I've known you, that I've been in Michigan, 90% of the time, people are like, "Oh, Jeremy Sasson. Oh, Detroit Country Day community. Oh, Jeremy Sasson. Restaurant community. Oh, Jeremy Sasson. Social circles. Jeremy Sasson." Then, like 1 out of every 10 times, I'd hear, "Oh, Jeremy Sasson." I'd be like, "Oh, Sasson, huh?" I'm like, well, hooked on phonics I thought worked for me. And based on the spelling, I'm like, well, no, I'm just going to say Jeremy Sasson.
Love it.
And then I bring this up to you today, and then tell me the true story.
So we're going to set the record straight. At the Podium. Growing up as a child, my last name was always Sasson. My mom was very clear and directional about the fact that that's how she thought the interpretation of my last name was spelt. As I'd mentioned to you earlier, my last name is Sasson, and it means joy in Hebrew. My father was born in Israel. My last name is a name derivative from the Bible. And when I left Michigan, there was a lot of other Sassons around the country, but a lot of them have chosen to use the name Sassoon. So very quickly, people were calling me Sassoon. And I think, as we mentioned, sometimes it's a little bit exhausting to correct everybody on your last name. So let's set the record straight here. It's technically Jeremy Sasson, Ali Sasson, and all my kids are Sassons, which means joy. So every time you look at me, I hope you remember that word. But I will accept all three names in case you feel more comfortable with Sasson, Sassoon, or Sasson. And by the way, I made that record clear now for my brother and my sister and my parents. So yes, I'll take any three, but there's the story of my last name.
Well, you know what? And how fitting that the name represents joy.
Sure.
If y'all have ever met his family, I mean, from Allie to these four beautiful children, it's nothing but joy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also resonates in, being an entrepreneur and being a passionate person. You can't do any of those things without joy. So they walk hand in hand for me.
I mean, I think there's so many different avenues that we can navigate in this incredibly dynamic and successful story. And it's interesting because most people associate the name Sasson with a great deal of success. And yet, you don't always win. It's like all those like Instagram quotes of like, right? People only see the wins, right? They don't see the work in the dark of night. They don't see the mistakes. They don't see the adversity that you face building towards those huge wins. So I think for today, if you're good with it, I want to go from, early childhood to navigate to an energy career in New York City, and then coming back home to the state of Michigan to become one of the most powerful, influential, and dominant entrepreneurs in the state. And so I kind of want to navigate all of that. And at the end, I want to wrap up with a little bit about the future.
Yeah.
Would that be all right?
Love to take you there.
All right. So let's talk about just the early childhood. What was it like growing up with Mr. and Mrs. Sasson as parents?
Oh, boy. I think I had the luxury and pleasure of something I didn't necessarily appreciate until later in life. Two super hardworking parents that were sacrificial in pretty much every part of their life: time, energy, resources, you name it. So I had, I think, a front row seat to see competitive, hardworking, committed parents. My dad came from nothing. My mom grew up here and is super educated and is unbelievably sophisticatedly smart. And so it was kind of unique. It's like two worlds that collided. It was like, I use a frame of reference like my business that I'm in. Like, they were a unique recipe. The way that the components of the two of them meshed together as parents had a unique way of injecting kind of this uniqueness that I think I resonate, which is like lots of structure, plenty of street influence. Like my dad is the furthest thing from the boardroom, and just watching the two of them jive put a lot of influence. And I think growing up, my parents, it's funny, we talk about sports all the time. My parents are the furthest human beings on the planet from sports. And I always asked them, like, how did I get into sports? And they were like, I think your friends and you just wanted it. And my parents never stopped us from chasing anything that was interesting to us. And I think also, like, my parents' expectations were also very high for their kids. So where we didn't want to let them down, and we didn't want to sell ourselves any bit short. But I think, also growing up, I have siblings that are very different, like many people. Everyone's siblings influence their lives.
Unpack those different personalities a little bit.
Yeah, so that's like I grew up with an extra mom with an older sister, and I grew up with, a younger brother who's a year younger. So it's like I always had someone to play with And then I always had someone to remind me that I was maybe playing too rough with. And I think it just let me have kind of my own track. You know, you think about that. So I'm a middle child, oldest son. I think my parents raised all three of us the same, but different at the same time. You know, everyone got their own dose of, knowledge and instruction. I look back, I felt like, and then maybe even in I think my parents' expectations were not any higher for me than my siblings, but I felt it maybe more clearly. And at the same time, I watched my dad. My dad's an oldest son, so he also kind of led and kind of spearheaded the direction for a lot of his siblings growing up. I felt the same obligation for myself. But I would look back, I think maybe what's maybe sheltered or influenced the most amount of my later life influence is my parents sacrificed, and I was aware of it.
Yes.
And it was my responsibility to do the same. Like, they put a lot of resources on the table for us to do stuff. It was my responsibility to get a return on that investment.
Share a little bit about the story of how you navigated your decision to go from Detroit Country Day to college.
Sure.
I mean, my children are at Detroit Country Day. I mean, partially because of friendships like ours. People speak so fondly of this place, and I've gotten to experience why it is so magical to be able to give your children that type of blessing and privilege to experience both academically and athletically.
Yeah.
You were an absolute standout athlete, and it's okay. Like, you're going to be humble,
Sure.
but you were. And I think from what I've heard and the stories I've heard from others that are close to you, that was a big part of who you were in high school. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And then how you made a decision to head to college and what you chose to do?
Yeah, I think, there's a point where nobody chooses to go to Country Day. Everybody is, initially, for most part, I would say maybe later on the opportunity is different. But in early age, I started Country Day at 6 years old. So it wasn't a choice that I made. It was a choice my parents made. And then as I became more aware of who I was as a person, and as a student and as an athlete, my interest in the school started to blossom. But early on, I think, and I say this all the time, like, one of my gifts is my level of emotional awareness. Like, I am just lucky born to understand environmentally where I am the second I get there. And I would say that at Country Day, I realized this place was a melting pot of extraordinary humans with lots of different interests and lots of different gifts. And at the same time, what was my gifts were definitely different than a lot of the other people around me. So, looking back, man, I really was not a great student, but I think I was not a great student by choice. And I look back because I knew I ended up being a great student in college by choice. I just knew how I was going to get through Country Day was kind of at my pace and my cadence, and not at the school's pace and not at the school's cadence, which, by the way, is unique in many respects because the school has such a demanding expectation of its students. And my interest was like, well, how do I navigate this thing at the opportunity of my own pleasure? So, it goes back. I think we've talked about this in the past. I'm crazy relationship centric.
Yes.
I mean, I look back, the stuff that I was able to do at that school shaped me later on in life because I was amazing at almost breaking every rule, but never breaking any of them. And it allowed me to be myself in that school and have my own, a place where everyone's dressed the same. I didn't want to dress the same. How could I get away with not dressing the same? In a place where everyone is on the same schedule, how do I not have the same schedule? And listen, that's an entrepreneurial mentality at an early age. I wasn't interested in the big corporate job ever, even as a child. Look back, but then I looked around me and I was surrounded with a lot of great parents who had these big corporate jobs. So
I think we're going to stay on Country Day before we go to college. Okay. Because
there's a lot there.
Keep going though. I just wanted to let you know, don't even go to college because now I've got 2 follow-up questions.
Listen, part of me is trying to give you a lot without having to say too much. But the fact of the matter is I really understood how to work a system.
Say more about that,
Okay,
because
so
I think
Country Day is a business. It's an institution of education, but it's a business. And for all intents and purposes, it's for the profit of developing people. So if you don't see school through that lens and you see it as academia, then you're only there for academia. I was not there at 16, 17, 18 years old for academia.
Yes.
I was there to know who I was going to pick up the phone when I left this school, who was going to answer. And I knew that at an early age. That's a result of also my parents, because my dad, being a street guy, made me hyper aware of what it is to not be, a spoiled kid going to a $40,000 a year school and enjoying, premium education, but really understand what it meant to be around human beings. And I could tell you the names of almost every parent in my class, the kids I went to school with, where some of the kids, I don't even remember the names, but I remember their parents.
Yes.
Because I understood, like, those were the people making the sacrifices at that school.
Well, and I'm just going to acknowledge this really quick. In the nearly a decade that I've known you, I've never been in a room with you where you didn't go out of your way to say, "Oh, Coach so-and-so, this is Manuel Amezcua," or, "Hey, Manny, this is so-and-so,"
sure.
Right? And so I see that, right? You're saying this, and I'm like, yeah, 20 years later, it's exactly one of the ways that I would describe you, which is a connector of good people.
Yep.
And it has always felt as if you're a friend of mine, then you're a friend of theirs as well. Totally. So let me facilitate that introduction.
And I think that's been, I wouldn't even call it a calling card, but I would say that's like at the core of who I am. And you look at the underlying mission statement of even my company today. I'm not in the restaurant business. I'm in the relationship business. Who's in my dining room? Why are they here? What do they love? What brings them back? What's on their mind, heart? Where are they going from here? What's happening next week? That's more important to me than how you like your steak cooked sometimes. And I think that was an early sensation. Like, I was very aware emotionally in the school of who was in charge, who called the shots, who's on the board of directors. Those were things I was interested in at 16 years old.
Well, in one of the questions that you made me think about was there someone in the school at that time that clearly saw this sort of unique point of differentiation in you compared to maybe many of the students who, I've gone off on rabbit hole rants about this. I feel as like the majority of the educational world wants to make us factory workers, right? They want the children to show up on time, be dressed a certain way, punch the clock properly, say please and thank you, sit up, stand up, sit down, put your hand up, put your hand down, pick up your pencil, write this, write that, come to the board, clean the board. And it's like, how, like, this country is built by visionary humans who overcome a ton of adversity, 99 points of failure before they finally get a micro win that then keeps them going for another 99 points of failure to get the next micro win. And I feel as if our country was built by people like that. And yet our educational system is so different. So I'm always curious, when there's a unicorn like you, who was the person that saw that and then encouraged you to actually be yourself?
I think a lot of, and I'll give them a shout out here in a minute, but I think a lot of the teachers and administrators who had been around could see the difference between the populace and the standout. You know what I mean? And I wasn't a standout student. And to be honest, like, there were other standout athletes, but I was a standout human. I think that's what stood out. I cared so interestingly enough about, what are you doing this weekend, to a teacher? What's your plan for your vacation? Where are you doing over summer break? Not, hey, what's on the syllabus and the agenda? I didn't ask the questions everybody else asked. So, like, I look back, and some of them are retired now, but obviously Dan McLean is somebody who I focused on relationship with, not just because of a coach, but remember, I didn't have parents that had any interest in sports. So I didn't have a lot of sport mentorship. And so having coaches that, influenced me or pushed me hard was important. But, like, then I look back and I'm like, Marianne DeVogel in the art department. She wasn't my advisor, but she knew that I was different, and she wanted to water that plant. Mrs. Keeler, who was the librarian, like, these people understood that I was on the fringe of pushing the limits of comfort in that school, never breaking rules, because like my parents always reminded me that their reputation was as important as me going to that school. But I really wanted to be able to understand. My brother and I joke, we're 1 grade apart. Okay, I'm putting this one on the record. John Wilson, you're getting called out, all right?
Jay Will.
We were in the same English class together. My brother and I, 1 grade apart. I'm a senior. He's a junior. My brother's an A student, 1500 SAT kind of guy. And he turns in this paper back in the fall. And Jay Will calls me and he's like, Jeremy, you still haven't turned the paper in. It's like the end of the school year. He's like, you just have to turn it in. I'm like, okay, I'm going to turn it in. Don't worry. I got to do it. I'm almost done. Well, I just changed my brother's name on the top, put my name on it, and resubmitted the paper. My brother had an A, and Jay Will gave me like a C+. Really, he's like, the paper was great, but the timing was terrible. That was my DNA at Country Day. Like, I just understood I had to get through it because I didn't care as much about the academia. But what I did come to learn is there still is no shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether you choose to stretch the limit or not, there is no shortcut. And if you're going to try to shortcut, you will, fall short.
Well, and I want to make sure that we get to the timeline of launching Heirloom Hospitality in 2010, Townhouse Birmingham in 11, Townhouse Detroit in 15, Prime and Proper in Capitol Park in 17, Mad Nice in 23, Ava Amezcua's favorite, and coming up here this year, Prime and Proper Nashville. I want to get to that timeline, but let's talk a little bit about the transition from high school to college.
Sure.
Can you share that journey with our listeners?
Yeah, of course. So I look back, my college application process was kind of funny. My 2 gifts at the school, besides the things that we've talked about, one being sports, the other one was arts. So, I did tons of scholastic drawings, paintings. That was kind of my hidden talent, and that's where I excelled the most. So I had basically an athletic scope of work or portfolio of work, and then I had an arts portfolio of work. Growing up, I look at my senior project, I went and worked at an architecture firm at Country Day, and so like that was kind of where I thought things would maybe go. Realized that wasn't a calling, but for me, my college application process was really sports driven. Who was either offering a scholarship or who was going to provide a walk-on to a place I otherwise wanted to go. I ended up taking the preferred walk-on to Michigan State, and that's kind of what opened the door. And I look back, I didn't even fill out an application at Country Day to go to any school.
What?
That was it. Preferred walk-on, Eva Dodds filled out the application, and that was it. That's how I ended up going to college. I didn't apply anywhere else. I just went where the preferred walk-on went. So going back to kind of the entrepreneurial side, my parents always had us work.
Sure.
From 13 years old till today, work was part of the DNA. So school got out, 13, you got a job. It's landscaping, maintenance, construction, whatever. And so I started my first entrepreneurial job at 17, the summer before college, 2 summers before college. I was detailing cars. Had my own car detailing business.
I forgot about that.
Yep, and it was a great business.
Let's go.
Any kid at Country Day, I'll give you an inside baseball. There's no parent that's going to say no to their friend's kids to clean their car, and there's no price they won't pay. So, and then every 2 weeks their car's dirty again, and you're right in line. So I did that business, and I loved self-performing my own work. In chasing it. And it was very fruitful financially for myself at the time, looking back. And then went to Michigan State for a walk-on. 1 year there, I realized like this isn't my future. It wasn't about football being my future. I was like, everybody that I'm living and mingling with is from 2 miles, 2 hours from wherever I live. So like I felt like I was living in this like very small world, regardless of the football part.
Yeah.
And so that's what triggered me to move to Miami for college, transfer. I was like, I need to go somewhere where I could see the rest of the world. And when I get to Miami, I realized football for me isn't the end of my life. I get to Miami, I see there's business and commerce and people and finance. And there was a business school that was a little bit, more interesting to me at the time. So like immediately at that moment, like business triggered. And so I stopped playing football shortly after being there. And the next step for myself was just chasing business. But also, I think this is what college represents. You're just trying to find yourself as a human, and like moving away from home and being further from, comforts of my parents or resources from what I'm used to made me just start navigating, life pretty fast. And that's really where I think my entrepreneurial spirit started to shift into hospitality, because now I'm living in a place where service is everything. And I start to see what it's like to eat at a restaurant and experience service in a realm I'd never experienced it before, and see it at a scale that's way bigger than what I was used to here in Michigan. So that influence started to kind of shape eventually where I'd go. But my college experience, looking back, I wouldn't change it. It was a little bit wild, moved to a big city, friends from all over the world, not from all over one state. I got to grow up super fast, and it allowed me to like get all of the adolescence out of me. So when time was up and shot clock expired for college, I wasn't in search of anything besides making money.
Sure. Let's, so I have heard you reference before that season from getting to Miami to then taking your first, making your first career move into energy brokerage in New York City. That's really when your vision completely exploded on the possibilities of what you could build on your own, and truly blossomed as an entrepreneur and a visionary. Can you talk about, maybe other than the culinary scene, like what were one or two tangible influences in that season in Miami and New York City that told you, I'm going to go back to Michigan and I'm going to become one of the most powerful players in hospitality?
Yeah, I think one step before I answer that question,
please.
I grew up in family business, and that family business element for me was always, as a child, a place I thought I might end up. Working with family, being in the family business, which is, the real estate business, and in particular the apartment business. And what I came to realize was like, I felt like my whole life was pushed to drive the boat, be in the front seat, get behind the wheel, make decisions, good, bad, or otherwise, and take responsibility for driving the boat. So coming out of college, I at first glance, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to family business. It's 2007. The market, my dad, give him tons of credit, is already forecasting that, things don't look great for '08 and slightly beyond. And so very quickly, I see myself as this like young, hungry 22-year-old who the idea of just managing what is existing and not building and creating, I'm like, the first 22 years didn't set me up to kind of put something on autopilot and manage it. So very shortly after that, I realized, all right, my opportunity is not here. And it's not in family business. So I took the first dive and partnered up with a friend of mine who I went to college with, who happened to be from New Jersey. We went to New Jersey and New York, and right at this time was Obama's Big Green Deal. And the state of New Jersey had a very attractive solar and energy credit initiative. Basically, between them and the federal government, were paying for everything. So we would go out and broker transactions that would allow government stimulus, state and federal, to pick up majority, if not all, of the tab. And we lived on the arbitrage between it. And the reality, I look back, and I say it all the time, is like, it wasn't financially that successful. But what it was the greatest learning experience for me to put in the work and get nothing out of it. And when I look back, I probably worked harder then than I almost ever have in my life, because I didn't get to really secure a lot of reward. So, my outset was like, I could sit and look at that as like a negative, or I could take that as a positive. And the positive for me was, no one could tell me that my effort was something that was left on the table or not there. Like, I just knew the effort part. And I'm like, if I could put that effort to something that catches flame, there's nothing that could stop the outcome. So that experience allowed me to kind of reflect on what would be next. And to your question about like, what did I take away from Miami that when I look back fostered the sensation of where I was going? And I've told this story a lot. I grew up with parents that work and don't cook. And we would go out to eat religiously. And my experience was in restaurants a ton, but with no idea that I'd ever be in the restaurant business. And then when I went to Miami, I actually saw an international exposure to restaurants that here in Michigan at that time had never been even close to available. And so in short, I think the biggest takeaways that I took from being in Miami is like the concept of eating outdoors, the concept of food being culturally relevant, and more importantly, that there's more to restaurants than just food. Growing up, it was always food. I'm going there to eat, and that was kind of the end of it. And I didn't necessarily understand the relationship factor of that experience. So maybe those are the biggest takeaways that I experienced there.
So can you pinpoint the moment when you said, I'm doing Heirloom Hospitality?
Yeah. So I moved back from New York, 2010. The market is still incredibly soft here. My brother just finishes Cardozo Law School in New York, and he and I look at each other and we're like, let's go buy some real estate. So the first transaction that we found was a bank-owned deal that was owned by Comerica Bank. I still picture like those conversations like they were yesterday. And I call that banker who was in control of the asset. It was in foreclosure. And I was like, hey, I'd like to buy this. He's like, have you ever been inside? Nope. It's been papered up, boarded up. But I'd love to buy it. It's like, okay, I'll meet you there. And go there. He opens the door. I'm thinking this place is a lot bigger. And it's this tiny little shoebox, which becomes Townhouse Birmingham. And that moment was a moment that initiated in the concept of real estate, but immediately just became this like very warm sensation of being something more. So I then took the property to like 10 chefs and restaurateurs in Detroit, and every single one of them said I passed it up, said no way. Every example you could think of. And after about 10 no's, I was like, I'm just doing this myself. And all of the things that I felt I understood about the business were going to be the guiding light for me. And I look back, I'm like, I really knew nothing about the business, which I think is like the most entrepreneurial part of the reality of being in the business. I didn't even know the language of the industry at all. I remember the opening night, the chef was like, we're 86 burgers. And I'm like, what is 86? I didn't even know what it meant. And he looked at me like, how did I sign up to partner with this guy? But that was just the realization of how far things have come, is because I was just hungry. And I think there's something about youth in business is that a lot of people over time don't do things as a result of the influence that the things they did early on in life drive them away from. Like, would I do that project again today as the 10th restaurant that I'm doing in my group? And for what I know about restaurants today,
yes,
I'd say no.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, it's what started it all. And you got to start somewhere.
I heard you one of the times when we first met, I heard you say it was the perfect first project.
100%.
Like, I would never do this project again, but it was the perfect first project. And I think about how blown away I was roughly, again, 8 years ago when I first sat down for a burger and fries there. And I'm like, wait, where's the kitchen?
Yeah. It's the hardest restaurant I have to run. And looking back over the last 15 years, what you don't know can't hurt you if you just don't know it. And, the storage facility is in a different building. The kitchen is not connected. The restaurant entirely, the dining room, is about 600 square feet. And there are more seats outdoors in an environment like Michigan that has about, 100 days a year that patio is relevant. And to make it all go just takes muscle. I swear it really takes somebody to drive that thing, because it's hard. It's a hard facility to operate in. But, I think when, like I said, you don't know, it's just what you know.
So I remember one experience I had with you a few years back, and specifically that restaurant. And I think Holly called the restaurant and said, hey, Manny's hosting one of his monthly men's dinners. He needs seating for X amount of people. He wants to stay local, and he really wants to come to Jeremy's place. And they said, oh, we don't think we can accommodate that. And so I said, hey, where else do you want to go? Remember that?
Yeah.
I texted you and I
Sure.
said, well, where do you want to go? I want to stay local. And he said, wait, what happened? And he said, let me make a phone call. And then in 2 minutes, you texted me back and you said, we're all set for 6 o'clock.
Sure.
For 12. And it just speaks to this like relationship centric mindset you have. And this idea of like, it reminds me of the Starbucks Experience chapter 2, where they talk about how every single detail matters.
Yeah.
And you're always fighting to find a way to say yes to your relationships, at least that I know of.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. In life, most people have a hard time, and I think it depends on the circumstance, but in many respects, a lot of people have a hard time saying no. But in business, they have a hard time saying yes. So like they'll say no a lot in the personal realm, but then in the business realm, they also, or say yes in the personal realm, but then no in the business realm. And I'm of the opposite. I'm like, I'm in the business of figuring out how to say yes to everything I possibly can, holding a standard to the highest possible degree where I'm not turning what we do into, kind of a game or a bit of a mishmash. But for me, like the biggest piece is you're making the decision to come to me. Isn't it my job to figure out how to make that happen? Mm-hmm. It's a lot harder for me to try to figure out how to convince you to come to me. You've already convinced yourself that you want to come here. It's my job to make it happen. And I think, the reality of it is like, I never find that ever to be a problem. Someone texted me the other day, was like, I hate reaching out to you for a reservation. I'm like, I couldn't be happier that you reached out to me to make a reservation. You have to understand, like, I'm in the business of loving to take those text messages or calls or whatever they might be. And I never find that thing to be anything but great.
Yes.
And I'm honored that you chose to pick my restaurant. I say it all the time. When someone writes me a message, I had a great experience or less great experience, my first response is I'm truly thankful that you chose to dine with us, because there's a lot of places to pick. And I wasn't there also. And that's another piece. I think in the relationship space, how good is the relationship if you only require me to be there to have a good time?
Yeah, it's not a relationship. It's not.
It's not business.
Well,
at that point either.
Yeah.
Because like I have to be there for you to choose to come there. Then one, it's not a relationship, and two, it's not a business. At that point, it's like unnecessary transaction. I'd rather not be there and not have that business if that's what's required. So how do I get the sensation to be part of the culture that you enjoy the experience almost as much? I know it's not possible to be as much, but almost as much as if I was there and I wasn't there.
It just reminds me of like such a childhood habit and like socially acceptable reality that, in the younger years, people invite you to something and people would consistently respond with, oh, who else is coming?
Yeah.
And it's
I need them to qualify whether it's gonna be a good time for me.
Right. And it's almost like this is the adult version of that, right?
Yeah.
That Jeremy Sasson has to be there for this individual to go to the restaurant.
It's interesting. I viewed that. I remember vividly when I told my dad I was going to go into the restaurant business. And, looking back, he was very encouraging. But I had explained to him, I was like, I just can't be the version that I saw growing up of the guy or woman who basically had to live in their restaurant for it to survive.
Yes.
I didn't want to be that person. I was like, I didn't go to college. I didn't have you invest in education for me to have to basically be the host, the concierge, the maitre d', the chef, the manager. It's like, if that's the case, like that's not a business. That's a job. That's a job with a lot of other responsibility.
Well, this is a good place to pivot to 4 years later.
Yep.
You open up Townhouse Detroit. Is it 10, 15, 20 times bigger than Townhouse Birmingham? And this is clearly the time that you knew, because you can't be at two places at one time, that the restaurant did not require you in order to be successful. Yeah. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. I mean, looking back, growing multiple locations was always part of the goal, because I didn't want to be the person who had to stand inside the restaurant all day, all night to make it go. Looking back, I didn't have systems. I didn't have an enormous deck of people, overhead infrastructure, systems, whatever you want to call it, that would really make it go. So like it was building brick by brick, and like every leap was another leap. And I think that's part of, something that I love about being an entrepreneur is I love the unknown. I love the darkness. I love the place of uncertainty. And I like chasing that in many respects. But going to store number 2 was a huge step. The store's, I don't know, 10 or 12, 13 times bigger, way bigger of an investment, way bigger of an infrastructure. It was a new market for me. You know, I was going from Birmingham suburbs to downtown Detroit. You know, at that time in 2014, 2015, we were really the first kind of big restaurant to move into the city in a very long period of time. All that unknown was interesting to me, as I mentioned, but it also started to change my understanding of the business because I used to muscle everything into shape.
Sure.
And now I can't muscle it all into shape.
Yeah.
So it's a conversation that starts to shift the concepts of people, systems, culture, duplication of vision, you know, getting other people to buy into kind of what I needed from the team. And, you know, that was the next round of discomfort and learning. And it's never all roses, as you know.
Of course.
But you put the face on to make it feel like it's roses for everybody. And you muscle through that, you know.
And can you think about 1 or 2 moments where you're like, that was a terrible decision? And maybe how you reset from that? And maybe not terrible, you know, I'm being sensationalistic.
Listen,
right?
I am emphatically a glass half full human, like no matter the circumstances.
Yes.
I only see optimism, and I'm never, you know, down on stuff.
Joy, Sasson.
Yeah, man, I have no choice.
Let's go.
I got to try and walk with that every day. I would say that for me, you know, when something's not working and I do it for a little bit, and I don't mean a lot, you know, it could be a week, 2 weeks, month, days, whatever, and it's not working, I go to my corner and I figure out what needs to change, and I change. Yeah. And sometimes for me, that would be 4 a.m. in my office after a long shift closing down Townhouse Detroit as a manager, or, hey, manager's no longer working for us, and
yes,
I'm closing it down that night. And I'm like, how many more nights do I want to close this shit down? 1. So I go to my corner and I'm like, what do I have to rehuddle? And that's just the reality. Like, and I tell you the truth, I'm in a marathon business, not a sprint. So I always remember that, like, there's another couple more miles on the track.
Let's go.
You got to just keep going. So I think I never saw it as terrible. I just would be like, no, don't like the feeling. Don't think this is how I want it to feel.
Yes.
This isn't making me have a lot of joy at the moment. And I would quickly look to pivot and then say, what did I learn from everything that I was doing that I don't want to do again?
Yes.
You know, and trade up or invest harder.
Well, and it makes me think of the time that you and I were discussing the idea that, like, the moment you feel like you have to do the job for someone else that you've hired to do the job for,
sure,
that's when you know you have the wrong person and it's time to make a difficult decision to change.
Yep. I'm a big right people, right seats. And I measure things pretty simply. Either doesn't know or doesn't care. I obsess about making sure that I give you everything I know and need to know about your ability to be successful. When not you, but anybody can help me quantify that I now know, you know, the only thing that caused it not to happen is you don't care. And once I feel like you don't care, it's time to promote you to guest.
Oh, man.
And I promote you to guest and then keep moving. But it's really a cultural piece. Like, and by the way, I don't treat that lightly. I want to obsess about making sure that I gave you every piece of what I know to know at the end of the day, your shortcoming wasn't my shortcoming.
Yeah. I shared this with you earlier, and I think this is just a really good pivot based on what you're saying is, so once you know that they care and they have enough repetitions or runway with you to know what the standard looks like, what best in class looks like, what excellence looks like, defined by your vision and mission, how do you continue to pour into them in a way that you build so many of these, like, obsessed advocates within your organization that operate like owners? And I gave you the example that I see this at restaurant after restaurant after restaurant, even from, you know, our time with Ava's 16th birthday at MANNY. We hosted our Christmas party there. We hosted our locker room to boardroom event here. You know, all of these experiences, everyone feels like they've got this owner's mindset. How do you grow that in an organization like this?
That's a good question. I'm looking back. I didn't have core values clear in my company until after Restaurant 2. I went into Restaurant 2 with no core values defined. I didn't even have a black and white mission statement in the company until after Restaurant 2. And what I realized was, man, I am working like a dog every day. 10, 11, 12 o'clock, leave the restaurant, go to my office to do paperwork to make sure I'm ahead the next day. And I found myself in this concentric cycle of just repeat. And I knew I wasn't getting adaptation to the things you just mentioned. So I spent time huddling on what it is that drove me and what I wanted out of everyone who worked for me. And that's where my core values came from. And they've pivoted over the years because as I've brought in also other great leaders, they've helped influence the clarity of those messages. Whereas the mission has been clear since the day I published it in this company, probably in 2015. The core values for the most part are black and white. And so to answer your question, I look for people who have those values, and I obsess to figure out whether you really have them or you don't. And I'll give a shout out to Gino Wickman, who wrote Fraction, who's a dear friend. And I have obsessed about the clarity of Gino's work. And I'm a plus guy. I look at, do you have the core values? And is it a plus minus, or a minus? So all the time, sometimes, or never. I have a qualifying factor in this company. You can't be a never. If you're a never, you're a cultural misfit.
Yes.
If you're sometimes, I'm going to work with you to figure out how close I can get to all the time. But I measure everything everyone does on core values. Every second counts. Can I tell in your actions that that's a point? Consistently care about the smallest details. I measure whether that's part of it. Do you own it with pride in this organization? When it's not good, most importantly, do you own it with pride? Are you willing to learn and teach? Like I constantly look for human beings that possess those core values, and I measure you based on that. And then at the end of the day, like your capacities drive what chair you could sit in on the bus to, drive the bus. But, take those core values. If they're there, and I use this reference all the time, chickens and eagles don't fly together. So I'm looking for eagles, and the eagles help push away the chickens. So when you got a lot of eagles, they make it hard for the chickens to stay. And that's the goal, is to really bring as many eagles in. So chickens don't want to be at the table.
You gave me the example of across all of your restaurants, if there's an important or significant issue or correction that has to be made, typically you might only be aware of like 1 out of 20 of them. And I told you how jealous I felt about that. And I said, tell me more. Sure. Because if there's something wrong in our firm, I know 19 out of the 20 things that are wrong.
Yeah. I would say the right people don't want you to know about everything because they know you're responsible to take care of other things. And it's the difference between whether or not they're doing it through the lens and filter of the things I mentioned culturally. Like, would they do it the same way I do it or better? And when you have people who are willing to do it the same way you do it or better, I don't second guess whether or not they're doing it. On occasion, maybe I see something they don't see, and I think it's part of the nature of being in the business that I'm in. This might be one of the reasons why I'm successful, even though it's something I sometimes wish wasn't the case. I only see sometimes the bad.
We experienced that as we were catching up this morning.
I see what's not the way I built it. Right. And so it's not hard for me to see what's wrong. And I have other people who see it the same way. I give Joel Halperin a shout out. He sees it the same way. Petro sees it the same way. They see what's wrong. They don't look for what's right.
Yeah.
And I wish, to tell you the truth, sometimes it's a little, you sit back and, man, I should really celebrate how great it is. But the day you think you're at the top of the mountain, you only have one way to go, and that's down.
I'm just chuckling because, of course, like always, you and I get here early. The team is setting up. Shout out to our summer associates and Holly and Ty, the crew. But like within the first 10 minutes, this is the most beautiful restaurant in downtown Detroit. Okay, there's no, I mean, it just is. And I walk in and I'm like, oh, guys, such a beautiful place. I can't believe I haven't been here in like 2 months. you walk in and you're taking pictures of the floor and furniture. And I'm like, I didn't want to ask you what you were doing, but naturally our conversation progressed to you telling me that these are all problems. And I was like, wow. But
I mean, think about it. I told you my core values: consistently care about the smallest detail, own
Let's
it with
go.
pride. Every second counts. Like, how long is it going to take to fix that floor from this moment if every second counts? That's cultural I'm trying to build. So I could walk in here and say nothing and kumbaya and kumbaya, and then it just keeps building. And then eventually that becomes what we have. And, that would never be acceptable to me. And the day, I told you this, the day that is acceptable to me should be the day somebody else should be running this business, not me.
Well said. So we go to our third restaurant, our fourth restaurant. I mean, beautiful places, two of the most popular places in the entire state of Michigan in the Midwest, Prime and Proper, and then MANNY. Completely different.
Sure.
I mean, just a completely different experience, right? I mean, the first time Samantha and I and Atlas and Ava went to MANNY, we're like, oh, and we had just gotten back from Miami. I'm like, oh, it's Miami in Detroit. I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I get to cut my pizza with scissors. I'm like, mind blown.
Sure.
We're going to come back. Where do you think, where do the visions come from? I mean, is there a circle of people in your life that you draw inspiration from? Are there people who are investing in the ideation of the next place? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so interesting. As I told you, I sometimes only see the bad in my own places. Anywhere else I go, I see the good. And I'm always trying to soak up what I can feel and experience. And then I have this special place to kind of bank them as little nuggets in my brain for the future. And I think my places are always meant to be a collection of my life's experiences bundled into a space. I will never tell you my restaurant's like so-and-so restaurant, or I never want to compare. It'd be like you providing, my financial services are like this company.
Which you've never heard me say.
I hope to never hear you say, because they're organically compounded by who you are.
Yes.
And so for me, I've always collected, and I always admire places and admire things, but I never want to do them the way that they're done. I always want to look to try to make them my own, make them better than what I've experienced if I can. And, I think there's a constant chase for filling a void of something I also desire to have. So what kind of pizza do I like to have? Well, it's available today now at MANNY because I'm constantly pursuing the things I love. What's the type of steak experience I want to enjoy? Well, it's available now today at Prime and Proper because this is what I want to have. So I think I see myself as this very obsessed and high expected guest. And so I'm constantly trying to be if it checks my box, I think it can check a lot of other people's boxes. But, the pursuit of doing the unknown is also interesting to me, as I mentioned. And, going to another market, as I take Prime and Proper Nashville, is unknown. Mm-hmm. Going to a quick service model with Mad Nice Coffee at Somerset is an unknown. I don't really want to do the same thing twice. Mm-hmm. It doesn't gas me up.
Well, even going from your first to second project, I mean, they're both under the Townhouse brand, right?
Sure.
Completely. Oh my gosh, completely different experience from the private events that you hosted during the NFL draft 2 years ago to the private sellouts. Tyler Conklin launching his foundation at Townhouse Detroit. I mean, it's a vibe, right? And so I see that in the success you've created from one project to the next. But let's stay kind of in this circle of influence, auditing your circle topic, and talk about how do you know when you have the right relationships or can develop the right relationships to go from Detroit to Nashville?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you never really know. You feel it, you sensationalize it, and then you never stop working on it. And along the way, I've had a lot of amazing people that I've worked with that some aren't with us any longer. And, sometimes early on in my career, it kind of used to beat up on me a little bit. But then I just realized rockets have to let go of certain, the spaceship sometimes has to
Components.
let go
Yeah.
of the rocket on the way to get into space. And not everybody wants the same thing you want. In the moment, it might feel the case, but then eventually over time, I look back and there's a lot of people who were with me 10 years ago who aren't even in the business anymore. And at that point in time when transition happened, you think for a moment, like, is this really the right move? And you just got to believe in your vision and be willing to put in the time with the people and then let them identify whether or not they're the right people. Like, I normally am not making the decision if they're the right people. They are making the decision. And I'm just quantifying and qualifying whether or not their decision was the right decision or not. So, it's securing people. It's a people business. The success I have, it lives and dies on the shoulders of everybody else, not just my own. And it's my job to fight hard to ensure we have the right people in the business all the time. But a lot of those bets got to get made long before you actually can financially truly make sense of them.
Yes, sir.
We're moving to Nashville to set up shop in Nashville. What's required to have that, and who's got to be on the team, and how do you carry the weight of that decision? But I'm like, if you're not a futurizing person, you never make that choice. Like, I'm thinking 2027, 2028 right now. Well, I'm never going to get to 2027, 2028 the way I see things if I am not making the right choices in 25 and 26 with people.
Well, let's talk about that before we begin to wrap up, because I want to wrap up around family.
Yeah.
And this relationship mastery book that I think is awaiting you to write.
That's my memoir.
Yeah. Relationship mastery.
Sure.
So, but the future, is it still restaurants?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the next 10 years is hopefully 25 more restaurants. And to get there is 2.5 to 3 restaurants a year. And it's very clear to me that, like, I need one additional, which I'm going to announce on your show today, my next project, which I haven't shared.
Let's go.
Yeah. I'm going to share it. I might as well have some good action. I'll share it. And then what's planned after that. But, I got to do 2 to 3 a year. And to get there, the decisions that need to be made along the way are monumental, and they pretty much revolve around people and process.
Yes.
It's people and process. Like, I'm never going to jeopardize the product. So me at this point, it's people, process. So after Nashville, which is November of this year, looking like November 11th, we'll open up in September of this year, the coffee shop at Somerset, which is Mad Nice Coffee, a fun spin-off of kind of a QSR version of that brand.
Yes.
And then I'm actually going back to Somerset with our next project to be our next brand. The name of the project is Eris, and it's kind of a nod to an old world yet modern Italian-American dining story, told through the lens of an heir to a great family wealth story about Italian culture, food, fashion, which brings kind of a fashion and food brand to Somerset in a finer dining space. That'll open up somewhere between April and May of 26. So right now, my effort while building all 3 of those is also working to fill the book for one more restaurant to join the company in 2026. And more than likely, that's not in Michigan. And more than likely, it's in a brand that exists for us. So whether it's taking Mad Nice to Nashville or Prime and Proper to the next city, that's where the boat's going. And for me, it's like, I say 10 years because I look at myself in decades at this point. I'm 40. Where do I want to be when I'm 50? I want to be at the intersection of having the opportunity to make decisions that I'm not able to make yet. It's not about, do I want my kids in this business? I don't know. They may want nothing to do with it. Do I want to still be in it? Maybe I want to be in it in an even bigger scale or bigger capacity. Do I not want to be in it? I don't know. That day will call. I think I know that day will call when I walk in my restaurant and I don't care about the broken tile on the floor anymore. That will be the only day I think that is resonant for that. Health and everything else working out to keep things the same. But that's the pursuit of chasing projects. So I feel that I can't chase future projects when I got to come in and be concerned that the people that I have on my team can't hold their end of the bargain. And right now, I think we're in a pretty healthy point where we have some great people fighting as hard for what they do as I do what I do.
Is Florida a location for anything from restaurant 9 to 25?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, we spent some time together there, and I'm always like, Nashville, I thought for sure it was going to be Florida first.
I think a combination of, both Florida and Nashville have a lot of things in common to me. There's some really fun, energetic, culturally relevant cities with, state infrastructures that look somewhat similar. Maybe the common thread is populational density and transition. A lot of people want to be in those markets, both for leisure, pleasure, business, and life. And many things I say in this business is you got to chase where the puck's going, not where the puck's at. And so for me, to get to where I think the puck might go, in Florida being that example, Nashville just felt also like an opportunity for another home away from home on the way to a place that has always felt like second home to me, which is Florida. But I also look at it, like I said, it's a marathon. And I say no to probably 30 projects to the one I say yes to. And, I'm not, to get to the numbers I want, losers and singles and doubles are not an option. They got to be home runs.
Love the vision. So I do want to be able to kind of wrap this all up with a little bit of a conversation on a personal level. I know you're going to write a book eventually someday. We talk about right now your pursuit of mastery as a father and a husband. I think the book's going to be called something like Relationship Mastery, because I think you're going to be able to include all these other aspects of your life and dimensions of your life with business and friendships and childhood relationships and mentors and people you adored at Detroit Country Day. But talk about what would you say are the one or two things you are the most consistent about in ensuring that Allie and those beautiful children of yours know that no matter what daddy's doing, no matter where daddy is, you are number one?
Sure. And I would say that's, probably something that I'm more focused on working towards than feeling like I've accomplished. While I try to grow a big and growing business, I think in the back of my head, and this is something that, maybe I've been told through my family or others along the way, that, and I always call these restaurants like my kids, because everyone will ask me, hey, what's your favorite restaurant? And I'm like, I don't have one, to be quite honest. It's like my children. I'm not going to pick a favorite. I think in this day and age for myself, it's never forgetting that my greatest work on the planet is the outcome of my children. And where I used to live in my office till 4 or 5 in the morning, and now that's not the case any longer. The reason isn't the case, isn't that I don't want to be in my office till 4 or 5 in the morning, is that I'd rather be home.
Yes.
With my kids, because I don't want to forget that that's my greatest work on the planet. I would say that, I give my wife the credit because she's the one reminding me of where I can perform. And I take that feedback the same way I would if I, the right people in my organization reminding me of, I need you to really push down on this for us to get to where we're trying to go. And I love being held accountable.
Yes.
It's something that I enjoy. So, I would say my wife, has done a great job reminding me of where and when I need to be present when I may not be, or be more present where I kind of am. I think the biggest piece is trying to identify time now, as my kids are still very young, individualizing their needs. Relationships, as I talked about, are not one size fits everybody. Every relationship has to be aware of what makes people tick, feel good, and how I treat you isn't necessarily how I think I want to treat you. It's how I think you want to be treated. My kids are the same. My oldest is a daughter, my youngest is a daughter. I have 2 boys in between, and they're very different. So I think to, really dial in on your question, I still feel like I'm in training wheels a bit in that arena, but I'm obsessed to be in that arena. While at the same time, like my first job, my first entrepreneurial choice, man, you go through a lot of, am I doing this right? And is it worth it on the other end of it? And I think being a parent is probably more challenging than being a business professional.
Agreed.
At the end of the day, being a business professional can turn off. Being a parent can't. And so I think being obsessed about that and being passionate about that is something that has enthralled my choice of being a business. Because, when I first started with 4 kids, I was doing really all this for me. At least what it felt like sometimes. And then my wife and I, and then when we had kids, I'm not doing this for me at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing it for them. But am I really doing it for them if I'm not really there with them? And the fact of the matter is, as I navigate to understand what my kids want, I have a 6-year-old daughter to a 1.5-year-old daughter and 2 boys in between. Each one I'm starting to see they want different things, and how obsessed am I in trying to get the most out of them so they feel like there's eagles and no chickens in the room. So, I just look at that as like, it's an opportunity to remind myself at every junction of the day, who's leading and who's following. My wife, give her all the credit in the world. She is a hell of a leader in that space. And it's that flying that plane requires co-pilots.
Yes.
No passengers.
Yes.
Right. So when she's flying the rig, I better be up in that front seat with her. And I give her a lot of credit that, she's got no problem holding me accountable if I'm not flying the rig.
Well, and I love that you went there. I mean, there's just so many parallels, and obviously Samantha and I are meaningfully older than you and Allie, but just so many parallels to their presence as a spouse, as a mother, as the CEO within the home, and a business partner outside of the home,
Sure.
and doing just at times, I think, so much more than we are.
Oh,
even though we think we're exhausted and we're leaving it all on the field.
Sure.
So I love that you went there with that. I want to rapid fire. So it's going to be the same question. I'm going to give you 7 names.
Okay.
And then I want you to answer the same question for all 7 names.
Got
Fair?
it. Yep.
The question is, if they get to pick the restaurant, where do they want to eat? So we're going to start with Mr. and Mrs. Sasson.
Being me.
Your parents.
Oh, my parents. Okay. Prime and proper.
Your in-laws.
Ooh. Townhouse Detroit.
Allie.
Townhouse Detroit.
Cece.
Mad Nice.
Jagger.
Townhouse Detroit.
Ace.
Townhouse Birmingham.
L. Not yet.
Doesn't even know these restaurants exist.
All right. So
I actually don't know if she's been to any of them. She's gonna look back. She's like, "You waited till I was how old to feed me?"
Okay,
Yeah.
so the family has voted. His
Yes.
second project is the best.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's interesting. I
I'm
said,
finally sweating. I don't know why that made me sweat, but that's hilarious.
well, I thought shoot, if I say the wrong thing, it's so funny. Every project has a degree of emotion to it, where
Sure.
different memories have happened. My wife and I got married in the park behind us. This restaurant was halfway built. We did our rehearsal dinner at Townhouse Detroit. So there's so many little emotional nuggets that have come along the way. And I think because we've built them, with our own hands to get them done, the ones that need us the most are the ones we want to be at the most.
Yeah.
The one that doesn't need me at the moment the most, okay, I'll come when it needs me, which it will always need me, but I can't be everywhere at all times. It's like my kids, my son wants to chase sports, and at the moment he needs as much attention to push him. We'll push him. The son who doesn't have any interest in sports, I'll push him to something else.
Mm-hmm.
But the same thing applies in the restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say I was pretty accurate to my responses. I hope. We'll find out when they listen and tell me.
So one last question, and we're going to go deep on this one.
Yep.
Okay. And I've asked it of a few dear friends of mine, and I've always enjoyed listening to how they reflect and react with their response. So we all believe in memento mori, right? We must all die.
Sure.
Fast forward, you get to 107.
Wow.
The children are there. What will the children universally say about their father?
Held nothing back in every part of his and their life.
Love that. So, folks, one of my favorite conversations. I mean, I think we went over an hour. I never do that. but love being with you. I mean, it's crazy, you know, almost a decade together, and 90% of the conversation we had today, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it. I know our listeners are going to enjoy it. Super excited for these next couple projects that are happening. Mad Nice at Somerset Mall, Prime and Proper in Nashville, Eris in Somerset Mall in the spring of 2026.
Yep.
And then he said, hey, Florida's in the mix for the 25.
Sure.
I am going to make sure you do a project with Israel Adonijah in Chicago within those 25.
Okay.
We're going to go to Chicago.
Sounds like
my hometown.
Yeah, we'll endorse.
And I mean, this was just awesome, man. I'm so thankful that you let our entire team come in here and be with you today. And just wishing you nothing but health, happiness, and success, brother.
Thanks, Manny. Appreciate it having me. It was amazing.